Welcome back, everyone, to Culture by Design. My name's Junior. I'm here with Dr. Tim Clark for a Single Point Lesson, the most valuable 10 minutes you'll spend in professional development all week. Tim, what's the lesson today?
The lesson today is mistakes are not the exception, they are the expectation.
So today we'll be talking about daring enough to try and how frequently you should be failing. We wanted to kick this off with a little bit of a quote. It's a long quote from Vincent van Gogh, but it's worth the space and time. Here goes. I tell you, if one wants to be active, one mustn't be afraid to do something wrong sometimes, not afraid to lapse into some mistakes. To be good, many people think that they'll achieve it by doing no harm. And that's a lie. That leads to stagnation, to mediocrity. You don't know how paralyzing it is, that stare from a blank canvas that says to the painter, you can't do anything. The canvas has an idiotic stare and mesmerizes some painters so that they turn into idiots themselves. Many painters are afraid of the blank canvas, but the blank canvas is afraid of the truly passionate painter who dares and who has once broken the spell of you can't. Life itself, likewise, always turns towards one an infinitely meaningless, discouraging, dispiriting blank side on which there is nothing, any more than on a blank canvas. But however meaningless and vain, however dead life appears, the man or woman of faith, of energy, of warmth, and who knows something, doesn't let himself be fobbed off like that. They step in and do something. End of quote.
That's powerful. So we can't sit around. We've got work to do.
We cannot sit around. You cannot sit around and achieve anything but mediocrity, as Van Gogh said. So, do we want more mistakes, though, or fewer mistakes? Some people might say, well, we just want fewer mistakes. That's what we're trying to do, is get rid of all of the error. What would you say to that?
I'd say that's not quite right. We want fewer mistakes that are crucial mistakes at the wrong time, right? But we want a lot of the right kind of mistakes. So we need to distinguish, Junior, between an operating environment and a test or experimental environment. It's the difference between the practice and the game. And this is blurred in so many organizations. So people shy away from trying things. They grow passive and afraid. And that's not what we want.
Making a mistake was, I think, in the top 4 most vulnerable behaviors in the ladder of vulnerability results across several thousand people. So we know that people don't like making mistakes. We know how most mistakes are treated, and that's why it's so high up the ladder. Yet, how much progress do we make, not just institutionally, but personally and professionally, if we aren't consistently making mistakes? Not much. So if you look at an organization where there are no mistakes, what are a few things that we can learn? What do you think, Tim?
Well, Junior, we're not learning. If we're not making mistakes, chances are we're not learning very much, because each time we make a mistake, we learn about a cause and effect relationship. We learn what causes what. We learn what doesn't work. That's experimentation. That's discovery. That's exploration. That's problem solving. Well, how do you get better at that? By doing it more. You have to do it more. So part of it is in the framing, right? If you try to do something and it doesn't work, that's an attempt. And for some people, the word mistake has a bit of a hard edge, a negative connotation. And so we don't like that too much. We're not talking about mistakes that come from being sloppy or neglectful or not caring. We're talking about mistakes that come during active participation, when you're really trying to figure things out. So think about this, what this fear of making mistakes does. This fear of failure paralyzes many people to not even make an attempt. And that's the tragedy. That's part of what we're trying to avoid. What we're saying is that you need to ideate and iterate more. It's about generation. It's about reps. It builds confidence and it builds critical thinking skills. We need more of those kinds of things.
Another thing that I'll add is I asked, what characterizes an organization where there are no mistakes? There is no organization where there are no mistakes. And you may not see a lot of mistakes, but they exist. And depending on the environment, those are often just hidden. And so while you may not see them, they're there, and they're more pernicious because they've been hidden. They've been thrown under rugs, and they're slowly eating away at your organization. And sometimes slowly, then very quickly. So what do we do? Here are a few suggestions. The first, ask yourself if you believe the statement. Mistakes are not the exception, they're the expectation. Do you really believe that? And you should sit with that for a moment. Do you believe it? If you don't, ask yourself why. Unpack that. Why don't you believe it? If you do, are you behaving that way as a leader? Is your behavior in accordance with that belief? Are you giving your people appropriate space to make mistakes? And again, we need to differentiate between the time and place for adherence to protocol, for complete and utter risk mitigation and elimination. There's time for that. There are areas where that's very important. But where appropriate, are you giving enough space for your team to fail forward and make new discoveries? And I'm not asking that question institutionally. I'm asking it personally. Are you giving enough space for your team to fail forward and make new discoveries?
Well, Junior, I think what's also important is, are you sharing your mistakes publicly? Are you talking about them? Are you comfortable with them, to learn about them in public, to discuss them, to examine them? Right? This is the psychology of making mistakes. And so you've got to set the example in doing that. If that's not true, then people will do what you said. They will hide their mistakes. Those mistakes will be driven underground. So it's up to you to set the example, to celebrate the right kinds of mistakes, to learn from those, to discuss those. You have to model that behavior.
So let's go back to the vein of the Van Gogh quote for a moment and understand that mistakes often come with effort. They only come with effort. And if we're not trying, we're not going to be making mistakes, and that's a dangerous thing. So here's another quote. And while I go through this quote, think about your own patterns. This is from Eliezer Yudkowsky. If you never fail, you're only trying things that are too easy and playing far below your level. If you can't remember any time in the last 6 months when you failed, you aren't trying to do difficult enough things. I really like that quote. If you can't remember any time in the last 6 months where you failed, you aren't trying to do difficult enough things. So there's an element of striving. There's an element of aiming high. There's an element of pushing the limits, of trying to discover, of trying to push the envelope a little bit. And when you do that, beautiful things can happen, but you're going to make some mistakes. So as we wrap up today, Tim, any final thoughts?
I can't help but think, Junior, I talked to a woman not long ago, and she said, in our organization, we don't make mistakes. Now, she kind of smiled and chuckled about it because she knew that was ridiculous, but she said, that is the culture of our organization. That is what is stressed. That is what everyone is told, that you can't make mistakes and that we don't make mistakes. Well, that's utter foolishness, right? That's a fiction. But think about the fear that imposes on the members of that organization. And think about the ambiguity, because they don't know when they're in operating mode and they don't know when they are in exploration mode. And so that doesn't help at all. That's just an example of what some organizations do. And what does that do? Drives mistakes underground. We hide them. And then we don't develop the self-efficacy and the confidence to try things, to get into discovery and exploration mode.
So what's the single thing we would invite you to do to help put this into practice? Here it is. Share your next mistake. That means, one, you need a mistake to share. So go try hard and make a mistake. And when you do, share it with your team to help set the cultural norm. Thank you, everyone, for your time and attention during today's single point lesson. We hope that this was 10 minutes well spent. See you next time.